You know, I could go to their land, because I'm Jewish, I could become Israeli. So I could go to their land, to their village. I could lease their land, maybe I could even buy their land. I could farm their land. I could build a house on their land. If their house is still there, I could live in their house on their land. They can't even visit because they're not Jewish. And it's these kinds of examples that really begin to illuminate what this concept of a Jewish state means for Palestinian people. Now, the majority of the refugees cannot return. There is sort of a loophole, though, and that is that the way that Israel is able to control the movement of Palestinians is through their ID cards, their hawiyas. Now, Palestinians receive their hawiyas at age 16. So before you turn 16, you actually have a little bit more freedom than people once they turn 16, but rarely do the Palestinian youth use the freedom, because who's going to go through these military checkpoints at age 12 by themselves. So a couple of my colleagues actually founded a group that is taking now these Palestinian youth to places that they will otherwise never be able to visit if things continue as they are, but where they can actually visit now before they're 16. 3 places, I'll tell you what they are, but as they go on these journeys, they're given a camera to document that experience of going back to these 3 places that they otherwise couldn't go to. And those places are, first of all, Jerusalem, secondly, the sea, and thirdly, their destroyed villages. And so they go on these tours for 2 days to discover these places that they have yearned for going to for their entire lives, most of them. And they take these pictures and then they show them in an exhibit, and next to them you'll see the commentary written by the youth themselves. So here's the first picture. This is from Jerusalem, and this child wrote, "This is Jerusalem, a very beautiful city. I love Jerusalem and had a lot of fun wandering around the city. I love Jerusalem because it's a holy city and I would love to visit it always." Again, these are youth who love Jerusalem but can't go to it because of their religion and ethnicity. The next day they go to the sea. This picture says, "When I saw the sea, I loved it because it was very beautiful. This picture is very beautiful." I really like this picture. I'm from California here, and I can imagine a more beautiful picture of the ocean or the sea. And yet what this shows is that excitement of seeing the sea for the first time, of these people who live 10 miles away from the sea. They can see it from their rooftops, but they can't touch it. They can never go there. They've never been allowed to go there. And in the exhilaration of arriving in the bus and screaming as soon as they see it and running out of the door, running straight into the sea even if they haven't changed and it's freezing. It just reminds you how exciting that would be, and how atrocious it is that those children can't go there because they're Palestinian. And then they go to their villages. This one says, "In this picture you can see the old mosque of Yazur. The Zionists took over after the 1948 Nakba. The mosque was turned into a synagogue. Our ancestors used to pray there when it was a mosque. This mosque was the biggest in Yazur in 1948. After 1948, all Palestinians were forced to leave, and no Palestinians were allowed to enter the city again." As you can imagine, finding the villages is not trivial. Of course, the kids have never been there. Only people older than that have been there. And there aren't any modern maps of these different villages. The paths are all covered up. And so they're sort of negotiating their way with these old pictures, etc. When they get there, of course, they happily pick spices and climb trees and explore. Then once they're even in the village, how do you get around? They don't know these places. They don't know which house was theirs. And so what they'll do is they'll actually call their grandparents on their cell phones. And those ones who are living in the refugee camps in the West Bank who can't be there with them, and their grandparents will sort of tell them, guide them along, go down into the valley, turn right at the pomegranate tree, that house on the left was your grandfather's, the one on the right is your cousin's, etc. Sort of being a part of this, but not really being able to be a part of it. Here are some self-portraits taken by the children in their villages. And here's a picture of one of the kids. He found his grandpa's orange tree, so he's excited about his oranges. And then they go back into the occupied territories, into their refugee camps. And one thing to remember is that this process of covering up that history continues not only within 1948 Israel, but within the occupied territories too. Here, for example, is a picture I took near where I was living. It's a Palestinian area, rural. There are Palestinian villages like this one all around the area. And yet the roads, which Palestinians and Israelis both use it, if the Palestinians can get permits, the roads, the only signs on those roads are pointing to Israeli settlements or an Israeli city, without any mention of the Palestinian villages and towns right there in the West Bank, even right behind here. You can see also that the Arabic has been scratched out. This is very common. And so you see really this process of erasing, covering up, ethnic cleansing, continuing through the occupation today in the West Bank. It's given this context of incredible pressure placed on the non-Jewish population to leave, to forget that history, that for me, actually I'm going to go back here, that for me, you know, trips like Birthright Replugged, for example, it's not just a fun, exciting thing that they can tell their families about, or, you know, an adventure, a field trip. It's a kind of resistance. It's a countering to these policies of systematically covering up that history, trying to forget it, trying to separate the new generation from what is theirs, from their birthright. You know, it's called Birthright Unplugged because basically as a challenge to Birthright Israel tours, they created Birthright Unplugged, first of all, for Jewish people who weren't getting the full story. And then they created Birthright Replugged for the people whose birthright has been denied to them. These are the refugees. So anyway, any attempt to sort of recognize, remember, and keep that history alive, keep that culture alive, is a kind of resistance to these policies. And it's a kind of nonviolent resistance. You know, people are constantly obsessing about, you know, why can't Palestinians use nonviolent resistance? Because, of course, the only resistance we hear about is suicide bombs and rockets. And the answer is that Palestinians are using nonviolent resistance constantly. We just don't hear about it. I mean, it's things from recognizing that history. What about, you know, these school children waking up at 3:30 in the morning because they have to go through 2 checkpoints and a wall to get to school. But they still do it. They insist on getting education. You know, they refuse to let the occupation prevent them from being educated. And in spite of everything, Palestinians remain some of the most educated people in the Middle East. You know, this is nonviolent resistance. Any attempt at maintaining some kind of normalness or dignity in your day-to-day life in spite of this kind of a system is nonviolent resistance. It's just not bloody enough to make it to our headlines, but it's happening. Art, you know, painting the wall, expressing oneself through creative means is resistance. And then, of course, more conventional kinds of resistance. Demonstrations in which villagers will join together, oftentimes inviting Israelis, international, to march with them down to the land that is being threatened, to bear witness, to protest. And it is this incredible resistance happening on the part of pretty much every Palestinian there, pretty much every Palestinian insisting on staying, that really gives me hope. You know, people say that the Palestinians are winning at least on one front. Demographics. You know, they aren't leaving. They are reproducing. They are asserting that birthright in any way that they can. And it's this, again, this nonviolent resistance that keeps me going in this work. And I'd like to end with a series of photographs that I and my colleagues took of Palestinians engaging in these different kinds of nonviolent resistance. Everything from, you know, demonstrations to unconventional things, to celebrating that Palestinian culture, music, etc. While you are watching, you'll be hearing a song which is sung by 2 Palestinian young women, Maïsa here and her older sister Shams, and it's a traditional Palestinian folk tune, Ale Belauna, but the words have been changed to talk about women's struggle within the context of the anti-apartheid, anti-Zionist struggle of Palestinians. Here it is.